back, everyone. As we speak right now, we're hearing two different narratives in the Chinese Communist Party. On one side, we're seeing a weakening of the very system they represent. We're seeing a weakening of their economy, a weakening politically, and a weakening socially. At the same time, though, we see a Chinese Communist Party becoming more aggressive on the world stage. We see it threatening war. We see it threatening invasion of Taiwan. So a big question is, well, what's happening? Are they strong? Are they weak? Are they a threat or are they not? Here to talk with us about this is Casey Fleming. He's CEO of Black Ops Partners. He's also a senior advisor on risk strategy and counterintelligence. Hey, Casey, great having you back on Crossroads.
Great to be here.
Well, we're seeing some interesting shifts with China now. I mean, a lot of stuff that you and I have been talking about for years now seems to be, well, basically on the surface. But we're seeing two sides of the Chinese Communist Party threat. On one side, we're hearing that they're getting weaker. There's party infighting, which we've been knowing has been going on for a bit now. Socially, they're destabilized. There's lockdowns. Chinese people are unhappy. Economy's destabilized. At the same time, though, they're getting more aggressive militarily. And so people are wondering, well, are they getting stronger? Or are they getting to be more of a risk? Or are these somehow related? What's your take on this?
I like to call it the cornered rat syndrome. What you're seeing is the Chinese Communist Party has made great strides and great achievements in Chinese communism across the world. With the pandemic, it's kind of come to a head. And what you're seeing is there's a lot of weakness inside of China, making the Chinese Communist Party weakened, and it's a cornered rat. So when you have a weakened state, they're in fear of losing power. And that's why I think that they're the most dangerous that they've ever been in the past, because they are cornered. Again, because of what's going on in China, the weakening. If you want to give me, if you want me to give you examples, the financial issues with Evergrande real estate, the financial markets, them going in and taking back companies and cutting companies back because the companies were getting too much power in competition with the Chinese Communist Party. So you're seeing all this weakened inside of China. You're seeing hoarding of 50% of the world's grain because they're worried of starvation and not being able to produce for their people, therefore causing unrest and not stability. Chinese communism is all about stability, 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 and everything to keep that stability, which is surveillance and all those type of things. So that's what you're seeing. What's going on in China today, all the way through their financial markets that are now in turmoil, and you're also seeing even rolling blackouts. So that if you can imagine rolling blackouts and what that does to the people, so you're seeing them also move forward with global partnerships with other nefarious nation states, China alongside Russia, Iran, North Korea, Pakistan, and they're doing their best to go around the world and create this group of allies now that they're in this weakened state.
And stability, specifically stability of the party, because they don't seem to have an issue. Again, kicking out business leaders, locking people in their homes. I mean, we see in Xi'an right now that there's 13 million people in lockdown. They're saying they don't have enough food. I mean, it's a bizarre scene to watch because, and this is kind of where I'm at with it. On one side, we're watching the party look like it's in crisis. We're watching the party look like it's trying to fix its global image. We see that side of things. At the same time, they're doing things that you would think would damage that. You'd think they'd be trying to make things better with the Chinese people, that they want to make things more stable socially, not lock people in their homes. They're going the opposite way, which is more control, more authoritarianism. Global relations, they're getting more aggressive. They're not trying to harmonize the situation, they're getting more aggressive. And business inside China, as you mentioned, like Evergrande and stuff, we saw them put some of the business leaders behind bars. They're investigating them, they're going after them, instead of trying to harmonize the situation, which is, I think a lot of people are watching this and they're wondering, well, what the heck is going on? What is the Chinese Communist Party doing? They seem to be making the situation worse. But at the same time, you and I think, can see also that they're strengthening the party's control over these different elements. And where do you think that factor comes in?
Uh, from this weakened state. They, like I said, when you're trying to keep a communist regime in power, the biggest thing that you have to worry about is keeping them in power, and that's what the entire system is designed to do, is to keep the CCP in power. They will do everything that they have to do to stay in power, which is why it's very, very risky at this time, because they are this cornered rat type of syndrome. Even if it means death to some of their own people or inconvenience to some of their own people, and on and on. The thing I like to tell people in audiences is, if you want to see, their intent is to colonize the United States as a Chinese state, a Chinese communist state, and the rest of the free world. And that's really what their end goal and end objective is. So if you really want to see how they're going to treat your children and your grandchildren, look how they're treating the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, the Falun Gong, and you name, and even their own people, with all the surveillance and so on. So that's where this is going, as the country continues to have severe growing pains. They have to continue to maintain power, and that's why you're seeing this squeezing, even though it looks very bad to, weld or sequester their own people, like 11 million or 13 million people, in which we would never think of in the United States, at least not today. That's really what's going on behind the scenes. So that's where the world needs to pay attention, and they're trying to build these alliances, these nefarious alliances with other nefarious regimes, and to build their influence globally while they still think that they can, and they're still in some type of power. And that's why it's very difficult for us to see, because this cornered rat can be doing, I mean, you could easily fall into a military situation. You could fall into another expanded global crisis situation. So it's a tipping point, I believe, when you're seeing this whole thing being congealed together.
Casey, there were some interesting articles that came out recently. I think everybody's watching Taiwan right now, and we're wondering, well, is the Chinese Communist Party going to invade Taiwan? Because they're practicing for it, they're messaging for it, they're doing incursions, air incursions into their air defense zones. I mean, we see all this happening. We see the language supporting it, saying they're planning to do it, that they're going to do it. Like inevitably they want to take Taiwan. But at the same time, there were some interesting articles that came out recently, which was saying that, there's top Biden officials basically saying that their real belief with, war with Taiwan is that it could become a political subversion war. That the Chinese Communist Party could try to take Taiwan by just subverting their system. And I mean, this is a different way of thinking about war and a different way of thinking about conquering. And I think here in the U.S. too, we're all wondering too. Are we going to have war with China? And it makes me wonder too. Well, we know, of course, that the CCP does have political subversion, but what will this war look like? Are we thinking about war wrong when we think about the CCP?
We absolutely are. We always are. War with China today and war with the CCP. By the way, there's only one China, and it's completely controlled by the CCP, so you can't extract one over the other. So war today with China and Russia and Iran and North Korea is all this hybrid war, which is everything short of conventional war. So that means weakening your opponent, weakening your target as much as you possibly can. And so hopefully conventional warfare is never necessary. So it's called the gray zone, again, which is everything short of conventional warfare. But you may eventually see that piece of it as well. China propagandizes the United States as the great evil in the world that must be overtaken. They say that we are the dark. We represent the devil, even though they don't believe there's only one religion in China, and that's the CCP religion. But they have painted us to their population and to their citizens that we are the great evil of the world that must be overtaken for China to have their overall destiny, which is to rule the world like they have in the past 2,000 years. At least that's according to them. So what you're seeing is this thing called the gray zone, and to weaken your enemy, like which would be Taiwan, to the point of capitulation, so that they say, okay, we don't want to go to war. We value our people. We don't want death and destruction. We'll just go ahead and join China. So you're seeing that. The other concern in the intelligence community is that this thing is staged along with Russia going after the Ukraine as well. So you're seeing you could very well could see you currently have a gray zone war going on right now with the intimidation, the cyber hacking, all these type of things in Ukraine as well as Taiwan. But you actually could see a bifurcated war situation, which is conventional war, where you could actually see during the same month that Russia invades the Ukraine as well as China, CCP invading Taiwan. So it's a very precarious time in history. What I like to tell audiences is this is all happening on your watch. It's a different kind of a war that you need to be aware of to protect your family and your generational family moving forward. And it's all happening again on your watch. So it's time to get boned up on really what's occurring, what hybrid warfare is, what gray zone is, what conventional warfare is, and what that situation plays out today. We have an enemy, and I call them an enemy because the CCP has called the United States an enemy repeatedly. Same with Russia. So how can you call them an enemy? Well, I call them an enemy because they call us an enemy. And so when you have an enemy that's in this position, it's time to really pay attention and see how we can help our country and the rest of the free world prepare and do the right things as this thing continues to unfold in this kind of pressure situation.
Now, Casey, I know a lot of people might hear gray zone warfare, and they just don't think it's that big of a deal. In our minds, we think war and not war. We're at war or we're not at war, and there's a lot of people don't see a gray zone between the two. And a gray zone between the two, they might just think, oh, well, it's just politicians arguing with each other. This doesn't affect me too much. Good, keep it there. A lot of people might think that way. Why should we care about this gray zone warfare? What does this actually look like?
The gray zone could be when you take death out of the equation and killing on the battlefield. When you take that out of the equation, it's worse than conventional warfare because it's killing an economy. It's killing our ability to fight. Admiral Chester Nimitz, the gent that was credited with winning the Pacific War in World War II, came out with a quote 5 years after World War II and basically said the United States has the most powerful military in the world. If you want to kill it, kill its economy. And that's exactly what's going on with China, Russia, any way that they can. Cyber warfare, stealing the IP. I mean, think about it. If you're a CEO of a U.S. company or a company, one of our free world allies, UK, Canada, Mexico, Australia, and so on, and you've got this IP that you spent 3 years to develop and $7 billion, and China steals that. They steal your IP. And because they have no cost for time, because they're on par now with you with your R&D on time and on par with you on your $7 billion expense, you've got to recover that in selling your product to your customers. Oh, by the way, they've got your IP now. They've got your customer list on who you're selling to. They have your product that they're producing in China. All they have to do is put it on a container ship. So how long are you going to be in business competing with a competitor, an enemy who is selling your product to your customers, at 45 cents on the dollar? So that's just one piece of it. We just in the last month, the number one killer of Americans is fentanyl. Guess where fentanyl mostly comes from? The fentanyl capital of the world is Wuhan, China. I think everybody knows where Wuhan, China is. They also China CCP ships the precursor chemicals to crystal meth, pills that are fentanyl pills that are stamped as Xanax and stamped as Valium and stamped as ecstasy. They ship those to the Mexican drug cartels to the western port of Michoacan. And they use the 6 drug cartels' beautiful distribution network to get that all through North America and even to Europe. So that's drug warfare. Religious warfare. They killed every bit of religion in China. The Christian cross has been banned. They've shut down churches. They've shut down mosques. And that same thing is happening now today in the U.S. So you're seeing Chinese communism on the streets of America. So that's really what gray zone is. the audience understands, they know something is afoot. They know something isn't right. You know, if you're over 30, over 40, over 50 years old, you know something is not right. After 2020 and 2021, something just does not feel right. You can't put your finger on it. That's what you can't see, and what you can't put your finger on is Chinese communism on the streets of America and in your living room. And I'm talking critical race theory. I'm talking Black Lives Matter. Blacks are extremely important. They're incredible people, but they're being hijacked in the Black Lives Matter movement. And many blacks understand that, and they're saying we need a different platform to move all Americans to, not just blacks, but all Americans to a new platform to take our country back from this whole Chinese communist infiltration and subversion. So yeah, it's a complex thing, but gray zone is what you're feeling. Gray zone is the thing that's underfoot. It's the weakening of America. I just described to you drug warfare. There's over 100 different methods of gray zone warfare, hybrid warfare, and it's also called unrestricted hybrid warfare. The word unrestricted means no rules. That means your enemy follows no rules. We follow the rule of law and international rules of order in how we transact business and so on. Well, your enemy does not follow any of that. They say those are your laws, and in fact, we're going to handcuff you with your own laws. While we don't follow any laws. So, in World War II, we had the Geneva Convention. Well, we don't have that anymore because our enemy underscore enemy does not follow any rules at all. And just real quick, there was a book published by two Chinese colonels, CCP colonels, back in PLA colonels, but CCP, if you understand my drift on that, written in 1999, Unrestricted Hybrid Warfare. You can Google that, and it's in PDF version on the net, and you can read that as well, and describes this whole thing called unrestricted hybrid warfare.
Now, Casey, it's interesting you're talking about what's happening on the streets of the U.S. right now and tying this to CCP subversion, Chinese Communist Party subversion, because we do know they engage in culture warfare. We do know, for example, that some of the main organizations that were behind a lot of what we're watching, Freedom Road Socialists and others, do have ties to Chinese assets. Some of them are openly Maoist, meaning Mao Zedong, Mao-era Chinese Communist Party politics, Maoist organizations openly. We know that there were financial ties between BLM and with Chinese front organizations here in the United States. Now, the Chinese Communist Party, they actually have a slogan for this, which is strangle you with your own systems. And I don't think this can be emphasized enough what that means. It means looking at what your country is sensitive to, looking at the gaps within your own infrastructure, looking at the open system of America where we allow foreign investors and anyone to start businesses. And when you're dealing with a country that has, kind of a whole system of subversion to get into the country, they have local assets they can use to start up things. It's very easy to subvert an open system. And they have a slogan for that. Again, strangle you with your own systems. One of the weakest points of America is the race narrative. Ironically, we're probably one of the most diverse countries on earth. Most multicultural country on earth that actually has harmony between cultures and religions, but somehow this is our weakest point. And we see them doing it. In fact, there were recent articles of Chinese Communist Party state-run media promoting critical race theory in the United States, meaning Chinese state media are doing local propaganda in the U.S. pushing critical race theory. And this brought up a lot of questions like, why are they doing this? So, Casey, why are they doing this?
The ultimate goal is to weaken the United States so it weakens our will to fight, and they can just walk on. They don't have to fire one bullet. We want somebody to take care of us because we're weakened to such a weakened state. That's exactly what they think. You've seen in the last couple of weeks, you've seen weaponized applications, weaponized technology from China to weaken our children, to weaken our adults, because we're doing psychological operations on the mind through social media. All these things are meant to weaken the United States and basically just kill our will to fight. So, it's serious. This is a war that's happening that every American man, woman, and child, as well as free world allied man, woman, and child, needs to be aware of. And it's to take over and replace democracy and freedom worldwide with Chinese communism. And like when we started this interview, it's you've got a cornered rat who's going to be doing, I believe, going to be doing even more serious infractions against global freedom and global democracy. So again, the key is it's to weaken the United States. And if you think your military is there to protect you, they're not. They're still fighting in World War II technology. War is going to electronics, robots, electronics, AI, all the radar jamming, all these type of things. And so the military is coming online that this hybrid warfare is really serious. But the thing is, our military is not meant to protect our economy and not meant to protect your company and your company's intellectual property and your suppliers who have your intellectual property. So this, when I mention these things, I'm going to go a little bit further. Black Lives Matter, critical race theory, defund the police, wokeism, all these things are Chinese communist methods, unrestricted hybrid warfare methods to weaken the United States. And we all have to be aware of that, and we all have to voice that piece of it. People ask me, they say, "Oh, Casey, what can we do?" I said, number one, stop allowing foreign investment and foreign influence in any part of our country, which is whether it's business, whether it's academia, whether it's government, doesn't matter. So when you hear of former congressmen being paid $500,000 a year to lobby for TikTok or lobby for ByteDance with the DOD, there's a problem. And so this is on every American. This isn't something, when I say hybrid warfare, get educated. Look to where you can go see hybrid warfare and so on. I'm not going to plug my company, but we are the people that connect the dots. And if you want more information, if you need more information to feel like you understand this a little bit better, you can go to our company page on LinkedIn and follow that company page. And we post like a dozen articles a day, and you'll see the ongoing weakening and this hybrid warfare piece against the free world and you and your family and your company. And that website, go to LinkedIn and look up the company Black Ops Partners and follow that company page. You're not going to be sold anything, but you will see after a few pages and scrolling down on those pages, you'll see that you're able to connect the dots.
Yeah, and I know, Casey, you've been watching headlines on this for years. You and I have been connected for years now about this stuff. For a long time, there weren't many people talking about it. But what you're really describing is a different way of thinking about war. Again, and you mentioned as well that BLM, defund the police, that these things are working, whether knowingly or not, towards the agenda of the CCP. We can look back at just conventional, well, not unconventional, but historic uses of ideological subversion. The Soviets did this. Ideological subversion, ways of destabilizing a society for a set purpose. And that included manipulating social movements that divide people, that cause disharmony between local, communities and police, between people and each other, between races, between religions, that they want to sow discord, to weaken the society, to disband the society, and to cause chaos within the society so that they're more easily conquered by just a stabilizing external force. That you can make things so bad that people are so desperate for change that they will accept almost any change you want to bring to them. That to the point where, a foreign army might roll in and people might say, "Oh, thank goodness, finally something to save us from this madness." And you mentioned that these movements tie right into this. Could you just elaborate on that a bit? How do these social movements, these divisive social movements, tie into the CCP strategy?
Well, it's to weaken our structure. The United States was built on we the people, and e pluribus unum, one group. So it's all this hybrid warfare is meant to weaken each main pillar we have in our country. We're not religion. Our founding fathers were Judeo-Christian and built on those beliefs. So it's to weaken every one of those beliefs. Lenin was by the way, Chinese communism is kind of derived from the Leninist theory. And, when you look at Lenin, his teachings were to also weaken the fiber and the fabric of the country that you're trying to overtake. And that's really what you're seeing going on. So these movements are meant to put black against white, everybody against Asians, left against right, Democrats versus liberals, and Democrats against Republicans and conservatives, anything to weaken us. There have been studies that have been out. This is like 2.5 years ago. I think there was an MIT study that they did, a social media study. And they found out that 84% of the messaging on social media was weaponized disinformation. And the key is that the audience believe that over the truth, the 16% that was the truth, or whatever. I think it was like 84%, so 16% the truth. So that's really what's going on. A Chinese general came out about a couple of months ago and said, we're getting U.S. kids addicted to Chinese apps, weaponized Chinese apps like TikTok, Zoom, those kind of things. Remember, well, Zoom's a U.S. company. Well, it was created by a Chinese national. It was developed in communist China. And if you remember, a lot of the transmissions from Zoom were sent to Chinese servers with the encryption codes to uncode it. So all these things are meant to the Capitol 6 riots. We have evidence that the Capitol 6 riots received funding from Chinese Americans. So this kind of discord is what you're seeing. The other issue is mainstream media is not picking this up because many in the mainstream media are compromised by the CCP, taking money from the CCP. CCP says we don't want that. And you've seen a lot of companies actually walk back statements of genocide or statements of control and that kind of thing. And they walk back within 24, 48 hours. Gee, I'm really sorry. Even the CEO, the well-renowned CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase had to walk back a comment. Does that sound to you like freedom of speech? Does that sound to you like a free world? So if you think that you're being compromised, you are absolutely being compromised, and meaning your audience, and every man, woman, and child in the free world is being compromised. And it's time to take our country back with education. In other words, get informed on this subject, be a student of this subject, and be alert to what to watch out for. And I hope this interview today gave people enough information to know where to go look for, to see what the program is, what the strategy is to unravel the free world, and then to connect the dots so they can be sure themselves of, wow, okay, here's the detail that I needed. And just for the audience, I remember when I first got into this over a decade ago, the first month I said, they're not doing this. They can't be doing this. We're not programmed to think this way. And then about the next month, I'm like, well, they could be doing this. And then the next month, it's like, oh my gosh, they are absolutely doing this. And after that, it just becomes like an ER doctor. You just get used to the trauma, and you're just dealing with it all day, every day, like going into battle. And that's what this is. We are in battle. It's just a battle we're not familiar with. And we always have been trained to think in terms of peace and war. And when it goes to war, that our military is going to take care of us. Well, you're at war, and our military is not programmed and not trained to take care of us, because it's a hybrid war that's on your doorstep, and it's during your watch.
Yeah, and Casey, I mean, serious stuff, and I think you and I have been talking about a decade, so I think we've watched this battle develop. When you're dealing with the CCP, there's just last question. There's a key part I think that's important to really kind of elaborate on, which is, in China, under the Chinese Communist Party, you have civil military fusion. There's really no separation between any part of the country. The CCP controls everything, as you've been mentioning: religion, business, cyber, everything. There's not a single thing in China that the CCP does not control. At the same time, which means every business is an asset, every economic decision is an asset, every student is an asset, as long as they're under the system and following the CCP. And if they don't, they can, they're persecuted. Everything's an asset. At the same time, they have civil military fusion, which means that everything can be weaponized and militarized. And it's viewed like that. And so when you're doing business with a Chinese company and you're a private business in the U.S., you need to people need to understand that you're dealing with a business that can be used for strategic military interest at the snap of a finger, just like that. And we've seen with cyber attacks, as you mentioned, of course, General Staff Department previously was running a lot of the cyber attacks, Unit 61398 specifically, then later the Strategic Support Force, that these are under the military. And then the military is working with the businesses, passing along that stolen IP to them, to private businesses to use to wage business warfare here on U.S. soil. Now, if we look at this big picture, just breaking this whole thing down, a lot of people might look at this and say, well, it's crazy. Well, first of all, what do I do? But also, why should I care? And Casey, what do you tell people?
The reason you have to care, you don't have a choice, is because your children and your grandchildren are on the balance. You're fighting for their lives, for their quality of their lives and their freedom, like all of our founding fathers and forefathers before us, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, fighting for freedom. That's what you're fighting for. The problem is it's in your living room now, and it's in your company now. So you're fighting for freedom. That's why you care. It's happening. You're watching it. You're watching week by week, day by day. You're watching your freedom and your children's freedom be just watered away with this nonsense on TV of critical race theory, of defund the police, of wokeism. I mean, all the way down to Mr. Potato Head needs to be asexual. Are you kidding me? So the point is, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing our values, your values being destroyed week after week after week. That means your freedom is being destroyed, okay? So if you think the quality of life, if you're enjoying a nice new car this year or next year, if you're enjoying your dream is to move into a new house, those are all out the window. If you're run by the Chinese Communist Party, they dictate what house you live in, where your children, which plant your children are going to be working in, and what they're going to be manufacturing for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's the world. So that's the world that your children and grandchildren are slated to be in if you don't become informed and be active. And if you're waiting for somebody else to do it, it's not happening. So what can you do? You want to get informed, and you have a duty to your family and your children, your grandchildren, your future family, a duty to get informed and get involved in this war. And it is absolutely a war. And the way to do that is to get educated. This interview helps connect the dots for you to understand really, to the degree at which this is serious. People say, well, how bad? No, number one, how bad is it? The Chinese say death by 1,000 cuts, and I say there are about 850 cuts in on that final 1,000th cut that basically kills you. Those other 999 cuts don't kill you. It's the last cut that you just can't survive anymore. So there are a lot of cuts in on their 1,000 cuts against freedom and democracy. What can you do? Realize mainstream media is not going to be covering this information. You have to know the sources to go to for that information. By the way, the mainstream media, the print mainstream media, are the articles that we post. So you're actually seeing mainstream media. You say, wait a minute, why am I seeing these print media, print articles posted by mainstream media, but why am I not seeing this on TV or on the radio? Why is it not being covered to the mainstream? Why are these articles just coming out, in that news blip? And they're very, very significant. I mean, honestly, they're overwhelming. If you look at the seriousness of the articles, and if you look of what is actually happening, and you look at the quantity, it's very, very serious. I had somebody tell me recently, they said, I paged through the first page and I became mad. I paged through the second page, I became sick. And I paged through the third page and I crawled in the fetal position crying for mommy. So that's the level of what we're talking about. So what can you do? Get informed and know that when you're seeing these things, that it's all part of a large master strategy. And the second thing is start, state, local, federal government, make sure that you are only voting for people that are going to fix this problem. And it means getting rid of all foreign influence, cash or otherwise. By the way, when you buy a product, a China made product from any one of your retailers, or you invest in a mutual fund, or you invest in a company that's investing in China, you are doing business directly with the Chinese Communist Party, which is hell bent on eliminating your family and eliminating your freedom. So my question is, why would you buy Chinese products? Why would you invest with a company that's invested in China or doing business in China to make China stronger, the CCP stronger, to end freedom in the world? You wouldn't. So that's how you get involved. And make sure your colleagues, friends, family are all aware of this, and point them to the right sources to get this information to them, so they're also on the same page. What you're going to see is, I think you're going to see a grassroots effort of Americans that are going to stage a comeback, a peaceful comeback. I'm not talking about arms or any of that kind of stuff. I'm talking about a peaceful comeback, a grassroots effort for Americans to say, we've had it. We're done. It's all about the Constitution. It's about democracy, and we're coming back. We're coming back strong. And if you're not on the program, you're not getting voted back into office. And if you're not on the program, then we're not having this going on in our schools. We're not having this going on in the streets of America, and so on. And when we see some of this nonsense going on, so on. The other thing is, don't let your family use Chinese applications, Chinese technology. Assume that it is completely weaponized against you and your freedom, and so on.
Hey, Casey, always a pleasure having you on. Thanks again.
Thanks, Josh. Take care. Have a good one.